The sound of an engine rumbling in the distance wasn't what I wanted to hear on a quiet morning. Out here, the only sounds I wanted were chickens clucking from the coop, wind rustling through the fence line. But instead, there it was, tires grinding over gravel, that pristine white SUV belonging to Patty. She was doing it again. 4th time this week, driving straight through my farm like it was her own private road. No wave, no asking permission. Just a glance through her designer sunglasses like I was some obstacle in the way of the HOA queen. I used to think she was just lost. Then I thought maybe she was testing me, seeing where my limits were. But then I understood. She wasn't testing. She was challenging. And let me tell you something. I'm not the kind of person who lets someone drive an SUV across my land without learning a lesson. Patty didn't know that the next morning. That path was going to be a little different. Not much. Just enough for a white SUV to disappear. If you're watching this from somewhere that's dealt with HOAs, you'll understand what comes next. I bought this place 8 months ago. 5 acres on the edge of Pinewood Creek, just outside the sprawl of Atlanta suburbs. It wasn't much. Old farmhouse that needed work. Chicken coop with a sagging roof. A wooden gate older than me. Held together more by habit than hardware. But it was mine. And after 15 years designing buildings for other people, calculating load-bearing walls and stress points for corporate offices, I wanted something simple. Something I controlled. A place where the only variables were the ones I chose. That's why every morning started here, at the gate. Not for nostalgia, but because it was the point where my space began, where I drew the line between what was mine and what wasn't. I ran my fingers along the wooden post, feeling the cracks in the grain. This it had been here long enough to know its job. Keep in what belongs. Keep out what doesn't. Then I heard it. That engine growl from the distance. Too loud. Too intrusive for a Saturday morning that should have been quiet. I turned my head. The white Escalade came barreling down the dirt path leading into my land. Not slowing. Not hesitating. Like the road belonged to it. Patty Drummond sat behind the wheel, phone wedged between her shoulder and ear, laughing at something her client must have said. She didn't look at me. Didn't need to. People like her don't look. They passed through. The front tire clipped the corner of my gate. I heard the crack before I saw it. One of the crossbeams snapped clean off, tumbling into the grass like a broken bone. The SUV kept going, kicking up dust as it disappeared around the bend toward the main road. My coffee was still warm in my hand, but something inside me had gone cold. I walked over to the gate, knelt down, picked up the broken piece of wood. It wasn't about the cost of replacing it. It was about what the break represented. A boundary ignored, a message delivered. You don't matter here. I pulled out my phone, opened Google Maps, traced the line with my finger on the screen. This wasn't a public road. This was my driveway, my land. She had no legal right to be here. I called her number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Professional. Chipper. You've reached Patty Drummond with Pinewood Realty. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. I didn't leave a message. I drove into town instead, to the HOA office, tucked into a strip mall between a Starbucks and a dry cleaner. Patty was there, sitting behind a desk with a laptop open, wearing a white blazer that probably cost more than my truck. She looked up when I walked in, smiled that realtor smile. All teeth. No warmth. Oh, Marcus, honey, I'm so sorry about this morning. You know, you should be grateful we even maintained that path. Keeps the property values stable for everyone. I stood there for a beat, watching her. That path is on my property. She tilted her head, the smile never fading. Technically, sweetheart, it's community interest. I'll send you the documentation. She patted my shoulder like I was a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. I didn't argue. I just nodded, turned, and walked back to my truck. On the drive home, I kept thinking about the sound, the crack of wood splitting, not because it caused significant damage, but because it was a promise. This wasn't the last time. Patty Drummond was used to getting her way. And people like that don't stop until something makes them stop. I parked my truck in front of the farmhouse, sat there with the engine off, staring at the broken gate in the distance. I thought about fixing it, thought about writing a letter, thought about calling the county. But none of those options felt like they'd change the structural problem. She'd already decided my space didn't exist. So I made a decision of my own. I wasn't going to fix the gate. Not yet. I was going to leave it there, broken, as evidence. And I was going to start building something new. Not wood this time. Not something that could be brushed aside with a bumper and an entitlement complex. Something that would make it very clear where my border began and where everyone else's assumptions ended. I opened my laptop that night, searched for Georgia property law, easement regulations, trespassing statutes. I read until 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep that night, not because I was angry, not because I was afraid, but because I realized something. It had settled into my chest like a weight. Patty Drummond didn't think she was wrong, and people who don't think they're wrong don't stop on their own. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside, thinking about limits, about how some people respect them, and some people only understand them when they hit something solid. Monday morning, I opened my mailbox and found a white envelope with the Pinewood Creek HOA logo embossed in the corner. Official-looking, heavy paper stock. The kind of envelope that wants you to know it means business before you even open it. I stood there on the gravel driveway, tore it open, and read, "Dear Mr. Webb, it has come to our attention that your property gate obstructs the designated HOA access easement route, as outlined in Section 12.3 of the Community Bylaws. Revision 2019. Please remove or relocate the gate within 14 days or face a fine of $150 per day. Sincerely, Patricia Drummond, HOA President." I read it twice, folded it back into the envelope, didn't crumple it, didn't throw it, just stood there, holding it, looking out toward the broken gate still lying in the grass where Patty's tire had sent it. And she broke my gate, and now she was telling me to move it. The logic was so circular, it almost impressed me. I walked back into the house, set my coffee down on the kitchen table, opened my laptop, searched Georgia property easement law, started reading. 2 hours later, I had enough information to know that what Patty claimed in that letter wasn't just wrong. It was legally baseless. An easement doesn't materialize because someone decides it should exist. It has to be recorded, documented, agreed upon by the property owner, or established through decades of uncontested use. I'd owned this land for 8 months. There was no easement on my deed, no recorded agreement, no historical precedent, just Patty's assumption that her convenience outweighed my rights. I picked up my phone and called the number on the business card Diane Keller had given me at a county planning meeting 6 months ago. She was a real estate attorney with a small practice in downtown Marietta. Straightforward, no nonsense. The kind of lawyer who didn't oversell or underdeliver. She answered on the 3rd ring. Diane Keller. I told her what happened, read her the letter. She was quiet for a moment, then asked if I had a copy of my deed and the county survey. I said I did. She had told me to bring them in. $200 an hour. I said I'd be there in an hour. Diane's office was on the 2nd floor of an old brick building that used to be a hardware store. Small waiting room, framed diplomas on the wall. She was sitting at her desk when I walked in, reading glasses perched on her nose, a stack of files in front of her. I handed her the deed, the survey, and the HOA letter. She spread them out, studied the survey map, cross-referenced it with the deed, then looked up at me. "No easement recorded here. Marcus, HOA can't create one retroactively without your consent or proof of long-standing use. You've owned this 8 months. They have no claim." I nodded. "So what do I do?" She leaned back in her chair, tapped her pen on the desk. "Document everything. Every time she crosses your land. Log it. Date. Time. Description. If you have video, even better. Keep copies of all correspondence. If they escalate, we'll file a response. But right now, you're in the clear. Don't remove the gate. Don't acknowledge their claim. Just collect evidence. I thanked her, paid the consultation fee, and drove home. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened a new spreadsheet. Titled it Incident Log. Drummond. 3 columns. Date. Time. Description. I went back through my phone, found the timestamps on the videos I'd recorded, entered them one by one. October 2nd, 9:15 a.m. White Escalade crossed property line. Damaged gate. October 5th, 10:03 a.m. White Escalade crossed property line. Honked horn. I saved the file, backed it up to the cloud, printed a hard copy and put it in a folder labeled Property. Legal backup. Wednesday afternoon. Patty came through again. I was in the yard, fixing a section of the chicken coop fence. When I heard the engine, looked up. There she was. Same white SUV. Same route. Same speed. This time, she slowed just enough to roll down the window as she passed. Called out to me with that smile that wasn't really a smile. Marcus, you really should move that gate. It's a safety hazard. Then she accelerated. Tires, spitting gravel, and disappeared around the bend. I didn't respond. Didn't yell. Didn't wave. Just pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and started recording. 47 seconds of footage. Clear shot of the license plate. Clear shot of her face through the windshield. Clear shot of the broken gate she drove past without slowing. I saved the video, added a new line to the spreadsheet. October 9th, 3:22 p.m. White Escalade crossed property line. Verbal taunt recorded. Then I went back to fixing the fence. That evening, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hey Marcus, it's Greg from down the road. Heard about the HOA thing with Patty. Just wanted to say, a lot of us think she's overstepping. If you need a witness or anything, let me know. I stared at the message for a minute, then replied, Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. He sent back a thumbs up. I didn't know Greg well. We'd waved to each other at the mailbox a few times, but apparently word was spreading. Patty's behavior wasn't just affecting me, it was being noticed. I thought about that as I sat on the porch that night, looking out at the darkened field where my gate used to stand. This wasn't just about a piece of wood anymore. It wasn't even just about the principle of property rights. It was becoming something documented, something with a paper trail, a pattern of behavior that could be measured, verified, and proven. Patty thought she was exerting control. What she didn't realize was that every time she crossed that line, she was building my case for me. I opened the folder on my laptop one more time before bed. 8 incidents logged. 4 videos saved. 1 legal consultation documented. 1 letter from the HOA preserved. I wasn't angry. Anger would have made me sloppy. I was methodical. And in my 15 years as an engineer, I'd learned that the most reliable structures weren't built on emotion. They were built on precision, on load calculations, on understanding exactly how much weight a system could bear before it failed. Patty didn't know it yet, but she was building something, too. A record of trespass, a timeline of harassment, a legal foundation that would eventually require an answer. And when that moment came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd just need to open a folder. I closed the laptop, turned off the light. And for the first time since this started, I felt something shift. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just clarity. This wasn't personal anymore. It was documented. And documentation, unlike emotion, didn't fade. It accumulated. Friday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. like I always did. Made coffee, pulled on my boots, walked out to check the gate before starting the day's work. But when I opened the front door and looked down the driveway, I stopped. The gate wasn't leaning. It wasn't damaged. It was gone. Not missing. Flattened. Both posts ripped out of the ground. The crossbeam splintered into pieces, the whole structure lying in the dirt like something a storm had torn apart. Except there hadn't been a storm. I stood there on the porch for a long moment, coffee mug still in my hand, trying to process what I was seeing. For a second, just a second, I wondered if I was overreacting, If maybe this was some kind of accident I hadn't considered. A delivery truck that took a wrong turn, a drunk driver who got lost. Something explainable. Something that wasn't what it looked like. But then I walked closer and saw the tire tracks. Deep, wide, heavy vehicle. Not a car. The tread pattern was clear in the soft earth. Pressed down hard, angled straight at where the gate had been. No swerve marks, no skid, just a direct line from the road to the impact point. I knelt down next to one of the broken posts. The wood was old. Sure, but it hadn't rotted through. It had been hit. Hard. The base was still partially embedded in the concrete footer I'd poured years ago, but the force had been enough to shear the bolts and crack the concrete itself. I ran my fingers over the splintered wood, feeling the rough edges, the way the grain had split along the impact line. This wasn't wear and tear. This was deliberate destruction. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my hands, and walked back toward the house. Not to call anyone, not to yell, just to check the footage. I'd installed the camera 3 weeks ago. Basic setup, motion activated, cloud backup. I opened the app on my phone, scrolled back to last night, and hit play. The timestamp read 11:45 p.m. The frame was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a streetlight 50 yards down the road. Then headlights appeared. A truck, Ford F-250, from the shape of the grille. It slowed as it approached my driveway, then accelerated. Didn't brake, didn't hesitate, just plowed straight into the gate at what looked like 20 miles an hour. The impact was brief. The gate collapsed. The truck reversed, turned, and drove off. I paused the video, zoomed in on the license plate. Clear enough to read. I ran it through an online lookup tool, registered to Drummond Properties, LLC. I sat there staring at the screen for a while. Not shocked, not even particularly surprised. Just taking it in. Patty hadn't done this herself. She'd sent someone. Maybe an employee. Maybe a contractor. But the truck was registered to her company, which meant this wasn't random. It was planned. I saved the video file, backed it up to 3 separate locations, then called the county sheriff's office, told them I needed to file a report for property damage. They said they'd send someone out. The officer who arrived was young, maybe late 20s, polite, took notes, looked at the wreckage, looked at the video on my phone, nodded a few times. He asked if I had any idea who might have done it. I showed him the license plate frame from the video. He wrote it down. Then he told me what I already knew. This is a civil matter, sir. You'll need to file a property damage claim. We can document it, but without proof of criminal intent. We can't make an arrest. I thanked him. He handed me an incident report number and left. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. I thought I would. But what I felt instead was something colder, a kind of clarity that comes when you realize someone has crossed a line they can't uncross. Patty had been testing boundaries. Now, she was erasing them. And that changed the equation. I wasn't dealing with arrogance anymore. I wasn't dealing with entitlement. I was dealing with someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her at all. And people like that don't stop because you ask nicely. They stop because they hit something they can't move. I spent the rest of the morning taking measurements, photographed the wreckage from 6 different angles, documented the tire tracks, the concrete damage, the splintered wood. I didn't clean anything up, didn't haul the debris away, left it exactly where it fell. Evidence doesn't work if you disturb it. Then I called Diane, told her what happened, sent her the video and the incident report number. She was quiet for a moment after watching the footage, then asked a single question. Do you want to rebuild? I said yes, but not the same gate. She asked what I meant. I told her I was thinking about steel, something anchored deep, something that wouldn't break if someone decided to drive through it again. She paused, then said, Marcus, if you build it on your property and post clear warnings, Georgia tort law protects you. Just don't create something designed to cause injury, property damage to their vehicle. That's on them. I thanked her and hung up. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and started sketching. Not because I was angry, because I was an engineer, and engineers solve problems with structure. I drew a gate design, steel posts, 6-inch diameter, buried 4 feet deep in reinforced concrete, crossbar welded, not bolted, lockable, painted, and in front of it, 15 feet back from where the old gate had been, a drainage trench, 6 feet wide, 3 feet deep, sloped at the edges, covered with a thin layer of topsoil and straw so it looked like level ground from a distance. Not a trap, just a design feature, a natural consequence of someone ignoring the property line. I thought about it for a long time, wondered if I was crossing a line myself, if I was letting this turn me into something I didn't want to be. But then I thought about the footage, the truck accelerating, the gate collapsing, the casual destruction of something that belonged to me, carried out in the middle of the night like it didn't matter. And I realized I wasn't being vindictive, I was being precise. Patty wanted to play by rules she made up as she went. Fine, I'd play by structure, by engineering, by the laws of physics that didn't care how much confidence you had or how many real estate deals you'd closed. I saved the design file, labeled it Gate Revision 2. Then I made a list, a steel supplier, concrete, rebar, signage, camera upgrades. I didn't write it because I wanted revenge. I wrote it because I wanted clarity, a line drawn so clearly that no one, not even Patty Drummond, could pretend it wasn't there. I sat back in my chair, looked out the window at the wreckage still lying in the dirt, and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not fear, just resolve. If she wanted to test limits, I'd show her what a limit looked like when it was built to last. That night, I didn't fix the gate. I left it there, broken, documented. A reminder that some people don't respect boundaries until they can't ignore them. And as I closed my notebook and turned off the light, I wrote one line at the bottom of the page: if she plays rules, I'll play structure. That night, I sat alone in the house with every light off except the one above the kitchen table. The design sketches were spread out in front of me. Gate elevation, trench cross-section, camera placement diagram, load calculations written in the margins. I stared at them for a long time, thinking about what I was about to build. Not just the physical structure, but what it represented. A line that couldn't be ignored. A consequence that couldn't be talked away. Part of me wondered if I was becoming the kind of person I'd always avoided. Someone who solved problems with force instead of reason. But then I picked up my phone and scrolled through the incident log one more time. 8 violations. 8 times she'd ignored a simple request. 8 times she'd treated my property like it didn't exist. And I realized something important. I wasn't using force. I was using physics. There's a difference between aggression and consequence. Aggression seeks to harm. Consequence simply responds to action with equal reaction. Newton's third law: for every action, an equal and opposite reaction. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Looked out at the broken gate lying in the moonlight. Tomorrow, I'd start building something that would stand. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because some people only learn when reality stops bending to their will, when the world finally says no, and means it, and backs it up with something solid. I took a breath, made my decision, not with anger, with engineering, with the same calm precision I'd used to design buildings that held up skyscrapers. If she wanted to test limits, I'd show her what a limit looked like when it was built right. Saturday morning, 7 a.m. I drove my truck to the Home Depot off Highway 41. The parking lot was already half full. Contractors loading lumber. Homeowners buying paint. I walked in with a printed list folded in my shirt pocket. No guessing. No improvising. Just the numbers I'd calculated the night before. 8 steel pipe posts, 6-inch diameter, 8 feet tall, 6 bags of Portland cement, 94 pounds each. 2 sheets of welded wire mesh. 4x8, 3 vinyl signs that read private property, no trespassing, violators prosecuted under Georgia Code, 16-7-21, and a 4-pack wireless camera system with night vision and cloud backup. The total came to $1,847.32. I swiped my card without hesitation. The cashier looked at the cart and smiled, building a fortress. I didn't smile back, just said, something permanent. He nodded, handed me the receipt. I loaded everything into the truck bed, secured it with tie-downs, and drove home, back at the farm. I unloaded the materials in sections, organized them by installation order, posts first, cement second, mesh and hardware third, cameras last. I laid out the county survey map on my kitchen table, marked the exact property line with a red pen, measured 3 times to confirm the placement. The new gate would sit 15 feet deeper into my land than the old one had. Not because I was retreating, because I wanted it centered on the boundary. Undeniable. Documented. No room for interpretation. Before I started digging, I called Diane, told her my plan, described the trench I intended to dig in front of the gate. 6 feet wide, 3 feet deep, angled for drainage. She listened without interrupting, then asked the question I knew was coming. Marcus, is this a hazard or a deterrent? I thought about how to answer that. Told her it was drainage. Legitimate use for a property with clay soil and poor runoff. She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, if you mark it and it's visible, Georgia tort law protects landowners. Trespassers assume risk. Just make sure there are signs. I told her there would be 3. She said, then you're clear. I thanked her and hung up. I stood in the yard for a while after that call, looking at the space where the old gate had been. The broken wood was still there. I hadn't moved it, hadn't touched it. It sat in the grass like a discarded skeleton, a reminder of what happened when boundaries were suggestions instead of structures. I thought about Patty, thought about the truck that destroyed it, thought about the way she'd smiled in her office and told me I should be grateful. And I asked myself a question I hadn't wanted to ask. Was I doing this to protect my land, or to prove a point I didn't have an easy answer? Part of me wanted to believe it was purely defensive, a man securing what was his. But another part, the part I didn't want to admit existed, wondered if precision could become its own kind of aggression. If building something designed to stop her wasn't just protection, but retaliation dressed in engineering terms. I stood there in the sun, hands in my pockets, thinking about the line between the two. And then I thought about the video footage, the truck accelerating in the dark, the gate collapsing, the casual destruction of something I'd built. And I realized the difference. She'd acted in secret, at night, with someone else's hands. I was acting in daylight, on my own land, with warnings posted. That wasn't aggression. That was consequence. I started digging. The trench came first. I marked the dimensions with stakes and string, then broke ground with a rented excavator. The clay was stubborn, dense, the kind of soil that fought the bucket with every scoop. It took 4 hours to dig the full length and depth, 6 feet wide, 3 feet down. Sloped at a 15-degree angle, so water would flow toward the drainage culvert at the edge of the property. I smoothed the bottom, checked the grade with a level, then covered it with a thin plywood sheet and a layer of topsoil mixed with straw. From 10 feet away, it looked like solid ground. Up close, you could see the seam if you were paying attention. But most people don't pay attention when they're confident. Next, I set the posts. Dug 8 holes along the property line, each one 4 feet deep, 2 feet wide. Dropped the steel pipes in, checked them for plumb, then mixed the concrete. 94 pounds of cement powder, water from the hose, stirred in a wheelbarrow until it reached the consistency of thick oatmeal. I poured it into each hole, tamped it down, let it cure. The wind picked up as I worked, carrying the smell of wet concrete and dust across the field. The posts stood like sentinels, evenly spaced, immovable. I welded the crossbar myself in the barn using an old arc welder I'd kept from my construction days. The steel hissed and popped under the flame. The bead wasn't pretty, but it was solid, strong enough to hold a charging vehicle if it came to that. While the concrete set, I installed the cameras, 4 units, 1 aimed at the gate, 1 covering the trench, 1 facing the warning signs, 1 with a wide-angle view of the entire entrance. I mounted them high, out of reach, angled down for maximum coverage, synced them to my phone, tested the motion detection. Every time something moved within 20 feet of the gate, I'd get an alert, real time, Recorded. Backed up. The signs went up last. I bolted them to the posts at eye level, spaced so no one could miss them. Private property. No trespassing. Violators prosecuted. And below that, in smaller text, video surveillance in use. I stepped back, looked at the setup, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just the quiet certainty that comes from building something right. Something that wouldn't bend because someone wanted it to. By late afternoon, the gate was finished. 7 feet tall, painted matte gray, locked with a steel bolt that required a key. I stood in front of it, ran my hand along the cold metal, felt the weight of it. This wasn't wood held together by rust and hope. This was structure, permanent, immovable, a line drawn not in sand or ink, but in steel and concrete. I took a photo, sent it to Diane with a single line. "Is this legal?" She replied 10 minutes later. "Textbook. Well done." I sat on the porch that evening, watching the last light fade over the field. It stood silent in the distance, a dark outline against the orange sky. It didn't look aggressive. It didn't look vengeful. It just looked like what it was. A boundary. Clear. Undeniable. Built to last. And for the first time since Patty had driven through my land, I felt like I wasn't reacting anymore. I was ready, not because I wanted a confrontation, but because I'd done everything I could to avoid one while still protecting what was mine. I didn't sleep much that night, not from anxiety, from anticipation. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind move through the trees outside, thinking about structure, about how the strongest foundations are the ones you never see, the ones buried deep, holding steady, waiting for the weight. The hours before dawn felt longer than they should have. I lay there thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. What if she didn't come back? What if she did, but brought the police first? What if someone else used that path? Someone who didn't know. Someone innocent. I'd accounted for that. The signs were clear. The warnings were legal. But still, doubt crept in the way it always does in the quiet hours. I thought about my father, who'd been a carpenter for 40 years. He used to say that good work doesn't announce itself. It just stands there, doing its job, long after you've moved on. The best fence, he'd tell me, is the one that never gets tested because everyone knows it's there. I'd built something that would be tested, but I'd built it the way he taught me, with care, with respect for the materials, with an understanding that structure isn't about dominance. It's about clarity. By the time the sun came up, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was ready. The kind of ready that comes from knowing you've done everything right, that you've measured twice and cut once, that the foundation is deep enough, the warnings are clear enough, and the documentation is complete enough. Whatever happened next wasn't up to me anymore. It was up to physics, to law, to the simple truth that boundaries exist for a reason, and respecting them isn't optional. Tuesday morning, 9:15. I was standing in the kitchen pouring my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. Motion detected. Front gate. I didn't rush, and didn't drop the mug, just set it down carefully. Picked up the phone, opened the camera app. The live feed showed what I expected. White Escalade. Same license plate. Same driver. Patty Drummond. Alone. Phone pressed to her ear. Approaching the gate at a speed that suggested she hadn't noticed anything different. I watched the screen for 10 seconds. Confirmed no passengers. No other vehicles nearby. Just her. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen. Outside, wind moved through the willow trees by the pond. I could hear the chickens clucking faintly from the coop. Everything else was still. I stayed where I was, watched or just waited. The Escalade didn't slow. She drove the same path she always had, buzz. The one she'd decided was hers to use. The front tires hit the covered section first. For a moment, nothing happened. The plywood held. Then the weight shifted. The board cracked. The front end dipped sharply. Nose down, like a ship taking on water. I heard the sound through the phone's audio feed before I heard it through the open window. A dull, metallic thud. The scrape of an undercarriage grinding against dirt. The high whine of tires spinning uselessly in loose soil. Then silence. I waited another 5 seconds. Made sure the vehicle wasn't moving. Made sure there was no smoke. No fire. No sign of injury. Then I walked outside. Not running. Not hurrying. Just walking at the same pace I always did. Phone in hand. Recording. The gravel crunched under my boots. The air smelled like damp earth and engine exhaust. I could see the Escalade from 50 feet away, tilted forward at a 20-degree angle. Front wheels buried axle deep in the trench. The rear tires were still on solid ground, spinning slowly, kicking up dust. Patty was already out of the vehicle by the time I reached the gate. Her door hung open. She stood beside it, one hand braced on the roof, the other holding her phone. Her hair was disheveled. Mascara smudged under one eye. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not confidence, confusion. Then anger rushed in to fill the gap. What the hell did you do? Her voice was shaking. You set this up. You sabotaged the road. I didn't move closer, just stood there, 10 feet away. Phone still recording. I kept my voice level. There were 3 warning signs. Patty, you ignored all of them. She pointed at the trench, her hand trembling. This is illegal. This is entrapment. I shook my head slowly. It's drainage. Marked and posted. You're on my property. Without permission. That's called trespassing. She opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of a car door closing cut her off. I turned. Greg, the IT engineer from 2 houses down, was walking toward us from the road. Behind him, Linda, a retired teacher in her 60s, appeared from her morning walk. And Tom, the mailman, pulled his truck over and stepped out, clipboard in hand. 3 people, not a crowd, just enough to be witnesses. Greg reached us first. He looked at the Escalade, then at Patty, then at me. Are you okay? He asked her. She nodded, still shaking. Then his eyes moved to the trench, to the signs, to the steel gate behind me. He didn't say anything for a moment, just took it in. Linda stepped closer, concern on her face. Patty, what happened? Why did you drive through his property? Patty's voice rose. He dug a trench. He trapped me. This whole thing is illegal. Tom walked over to one of the signs, read it out loud. Private property. No trespassing. Video surveillance. In use. He turned back to Patty. Did you have permission to be here? She hesitated. The HOA bylaws. She started. Tom cut her off gently. I checked the county records last week. There's no easement here. This is private land. Patty looked at him, then at Greg, then at Linda. None of them were hostile, but none of them were agreeing with her either. Greg pulled out his phone, started recording. Not me, not Patty, just the scene. The Escalade stuck in the trench, the signs, the gate. He didn't say he was uploading it, didn't announce it, but I knew he was. By tonight, it would be in the neighborhood group, 1,200 members, and they'd all see what I'd been saying for weeks, that this wasn't about rules, it was about respect. Boundaries. The difference between community and hunted and personal entitlement. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something quieter, like gravity, like watching a structure hold under the exact load it was designed to bear. Not triumph, just confirmation. I'd built this carefully, measured it, marked it, warned about it. And when someone ignored all of that, the consequences weren't my fault. They were physics. Patty called the police in ET, told dispatch there'd been an accident, that someone had set a trap. The officer who arrived 20 minutes later was the same one who'd taken my report about the destroyed gate. He recognized me, nodded, asked what happened. I handed him my phone, showed him the live footage, showed him the timestamps from the previous violations, the incident log, the warning signs. He watched it all without expression. Then he turned to Patty. Ma'am, did you see the posted signs? I thought it was. I didn't expect. He cut her off. Did you have permission to be on this property? She went quiet. The officer walked over to the trench, looked at the grade, the markings, the drainage setup. He came back, handed me my phone. "This is a legitimate civil land use issue," he said. "You posted warnings. The setup is visible." He looked at Patty. "You'll need to call a tow truck, and I'd recommend not returning to this property without written permission." She stared at him. "That's it. You're not going to arrest him." The officer shook his head. "For what?" "Protecting his land." He got back in his cruiser and drove off. The tow truck took 40 minutes to arrive. I stood on my porch the whole time, watching. Patty sat in her car, door open, staring at her phone. Greg and Linda had left. Tom lingered for a bit, then waved at me and drove off to finish his route. The tow operator, a guy in his 40s with grease-stained hands, whistled when he saw the Escalade. "That's going to be expensive," he said to no one in particular. He hooked the winch, dragged the SUV out of the trench, loaded it onto the flatbed. Patty climbed into the cab beside him without looking back, without saying a word. When they were gone, I walked down to the gate, ran my hand along the steel. It was cold, solid, exactly where I'd left it. The trench had done its job. The signs had done theirs. The cameras had recorded everything. And now, for the first time in weeks, the path was empty. No tire tracks, no engine noise, just silence. I turned and walked back to the house. Didn't celebrate, didn't call anyone, just sat on the porch with my coffee and watched the wind move through the trees. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity, something inevitable once you built the structure right. Something that didn't require anger or force or even intention. Just design, just consequence. I thought about Patty sitting in that tow truck, her Escalade chained to the flatbed, and I wondered if she understood yet, that this wasn't about me winning. It was about her finally hitting something that wouldn't move, something that stood exactly where it was supposed to, no matter how hard she pushed. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only lesson she'd ever actually learn. Thursday morning. I opened the front door to grab the paper and found a certified letter wedged between the screen and the frame. Heavy envelope, return address, printed in formal block letters. Cobb County Civil Court. I tore it open, standing on the porch, unfolded the pages, and read, Pinewood Creek HOA versus Marcus Webb. Plaintiff claims defendant created hazardous property configuration, resulting in vehicle damage, emotional distress, and public endangerment. Demands $12,000 in damages, plus removal of gate structure and $5,000 in punitive penalties. I read it twice. Didn't crumple it. Didn't throw it. Just stood there holding it, feeling the weight of the paper in my hands. It didn't surprise me. The system was where people like Patty retreated when reality didn't bend. When the world refused to comply, they filed motions, hired lawyers, tried to reshape the landscape through paperwork instead of pressure. I walked inside, set the letter on the kitchen table, poured coffee, read it a third time. Slower, line by line, claim by claim, like reviewing a failed load test, looking for the weakness in their argument. And it was there, all through it. She was suing me for protecting my land. From her. The refrigerator hummed in the corner. The wall clock ticked. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Everything felt ordinary, domestic, calm. But something had shifted. This wasn't about a gate anymore. It was about who had the right to say where things stood. I picked up my phone, called Diane, told her I'd been served. She asked me to bring the documents in, and I said I'd be there in an hour. Diane's office looked the same as it had 2 months ago. Same brick building that used to be a hardware store. Same framed diplomas on the wall. Same desk, stacked with files. She was sitting behind it when I walked in, reading, glasses perched on her nose, a mug of tea cooling beside her keyboard. I handed her the court summons. She spread it out, read through it without expression, then looked up at me. This is weak. Marcus, no standing. They can't claim damages on property they had no right to enter. I set my folder on her desk. She opened it. Inside were photos of the old gate before it was destroyed, video files on a thumb drive, labeled by date, printed transcripts of the incident log, copies of the HOA letters, witness statements from Greg, Linda, and Tom, each one signed and notarized. County property survey, deed, camera installation receipts, repair invoices. Everything I'd collected over the past 8 weeks, organized into tabs. Chronological, cross-referenced. Diane flipped through it slowly. Didn't say anything for a full minute. Then she closed the folder and looked at me. "You've built my case before I filed it." I nodded. "So what do we do?" She leaned back in her chair, tapped her pen on the desk. "We file a counterclaim, trespassing, property damage, harassment, nuisance under Georgia tort law. We'll ask for $25,000. I frowned. "I don't want money." She met my eyes. "I know, but the number makes them take you seriously. It forces them to defend instead of attack. And it shows the court you're not just reacting. You're asserting your rights." I thought about that. That nodded. "Okay." She pulled out a legal pad, started writing notes. "We'll file by Monday. Discovery takes 2 weeks. Hearings probably mid-November. In the meantime, don't touch the gate. Don't contact Patty. Don't post about this anywhere. Just document. If she comes back, call me immediately." I stood to leave. Diane closed the folder, placed her hand on top of it. "They started this on paper. Marcus, let's end it the same way." I drove home, parked in the driveway, and spent the rest of the afternoon organizing evidence. I pulled out 8 manila folders, labeled each one. Week 1, Week 2 to Week 3, all the way through Week 8. Inside each folder, I placed printed screenshots, video timestamps, incident descriptions, a structure of facts. Load tested, unbreakable. Every claim Patty made in her lawsuit had a counterweight. Every accusation met with a timestamp. Every assertion answered with documentation. It felt like drafting blueprints. You draw the line. You check the measurements. You verify the math. Then you trust the structure to hold. Over the next 10 days, Diane sent updates. She'd filed the counterclaim. The HOA's lawyer responded, defensive, full of bluster about community standards and safety concerns. Diane requested discovery. They stalled. She pushed. They sent partial documents. She pushed harder. I watched it unfold from a distance, like observing a building under construction. Foundation poured, framework erected, each piece locking into place. When you've designed structures long enough, you know failure isn't collapse. It's stress unaccounted for. And I'd accounted for everything. On a Tuesday afternoon, Diane forwarded me an email. The HOA's lawyer had sent a settlement offer. $3,000. Drop the counterclaim. Remove the gate. Sign a release. Diane's reply was one line. Not interested. I stared at that email for a long time. $3,000. Like that was the value of my boundary. My space. My right to say no. I deleted the email, went back to organizing files. By the end of October, I had everything ready. 8 folders, 4 video files, 12 witness depositions, county records, repair invoices, legal correspondence. I loaded it all into a briefcase, drove to Diane's office, and set it on her desk. She opened the first folder, then the second, flipped through pages, scanned timestamps, cross-checked dates. When she finished, she closed the last folder and looked at me. This is airtight. If they're smart, they'll settle before the hearing. And if they're not, I asked. She smiled. Then we go to court. And we win. I went home that night and sat at the kitchen table with the briefcase open in front of me. Everything she broke, everything I fixed, everything I could prove. It wasn't about steel anymore. It was about paper, signatures, rules that couldn't be bent by confidence or charm. I could hear the printer humming faintly in the next room. Papers sliding into neat stacks. Wind rattling the window frame. I looked out toward the gate, barely visible in the fading light. Still standing, unmoved. I thought about tomorrow. About walking into that courtroom with a folder full of facts and junkikim I'd spent 2 months building. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a stress test. And I'd spent weeks preparing for it, measuring every dimension, not just of the gate, but of this fight. Patty had her confidence, her lawyer, her assumptions about how the world worked. I had calculations, documentation, a structure built to hold. We'd see which one stood. Monday morning, 8:45. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Cobb County Civil Court, 3rd floor. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a flat white glow across rows of wooden benches, polished smooth by decades of nervous hands. The air smelled like old paper and lemon furniture polish. A clock hung above the Georgia state seal on the wall behind the judge's bench, ticking in steady intervals. The air conditioner rattled faintly in the corner. Everything felt measured, controlled, like a lab built for testing theories under pressure. Patty sat on the opposite side of the room with her lawyer, a man in his 40s wearing a navy suit and wire-rimmed glasses. She'd chosen a cream-colored blazer and matching skirt. Her makeup was careful, her smile tight. She looked composed, but her hands were folded too tightly in her lap. Her lawyer had a thick folder open in front of him, pages flagged with colored tabs. I watched them the way I'd watch load points on a blueprint. Not with anger, just observation, measuring where the weight would fall. Diane leaned close, her voice low. Answer only what you're asked. Don't volunteer. Don't explain unless they request it. I nodded, set my briefcase on the table in front of me. Steel gray, latches that clicked when they opened. Everything inside organized the same way I'd built the gate. Precise, immovable, designed to hold. I looked around the room one more time. This wasn't a courtroom. It was a test chamber. And I'd spent 2 months preparing the structure for exactly this kind of stress. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Raymond Harper entered from a side door. Late 50s, gray hair cropped short, expression neutral. She sat, adjusted her reading glasses, opened a folder, and scanned the first page without looking up. Pinewood Creek Homeowners Association versus Marcus Webb. Cross complaint filed by defendant. She glanced at both tables. Proceed. The HOA lawyer stood. Your Honor, Mr. Webb created a reckless and hazardous modification to his property that resulted in significant vehicle damage to my client, Patricia Drummond, and caused her substantial emotional distress. The configuration was designed with intent to harm and violated basic standards of public safety. We're seeking $12,000 in compensatory damages, $5,000 in punitive damages, and immediate removal of the gate structure. He sat down, straightened his tie, looked confident. I watched him the way I'd watch a beam under load, calm, detached, waiting to see where the fracture would start. Diane stood. Your Honor, the plaintiff's vehicle entered private property without the defendant's consent. Warning signage was posted clearly at 3 locations. The drainage trench in question was documented, permitted under county code, and visible to any driver exercising reasonable caution. Mr. Webb has every legal right to protect his land from repeated trespass. Her voice was steady, each word like a weld bead. Clean, precise, strong. Judge Harper looked at Patty. Miss Drummond, you may approach. Patty stood, walked to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. She sat down, smoothed her skirt, and folded her hands. The HOA lawyer asked her to describe what happened. She took a breath. I was driving through what I believed to be a community access route when my vehicle suddenly dropped into a hidden trench. There were no adequate warnings. Mr. Webb designed it to trap me. I could have been seriously injured. Diane stood, holding a tablet. Your Honor, may I present evidence? The judge nodded. Diane tapped the screen. A video played on the courtroom monitor. The white Escalade approaching my gate. 3 signs visible in the frame. Private property. No trespassing. Caution drainage ahead. Patty drove past all of them without slowing. The front tires hit the concealed section. The vehicle dipped. Stopped. Diane paused the video. Miss Drummond, you testified there were no warnings. Can you explain these 3 signs? Patty's face flushed. I didn't see them. Diane zoomed in on one of the signs. 4 feet tall. Yellow text on black background. Mounted at eye level. You didn't see a 4-foot warning sign. Patty hesitated. I was on the phone. Diane didn't smile, didn't gloat, just moved to the next slide. A timeline. 8 incidents over 6 weeks. Each one logged. Time-stamped. Video evidence attached, Your Honor. Miss Drummond didn't drive through Mr. Webb's property once by accident. She did it repeatedly, despite his requests to stop, despite having no legal easement, despite posted warnings. Judge Harper leaned forward. Miss Drummond, did you have written permission to cross this property? Patty opened her mouth, closed it, then quietly said, No. But the HOA bylaws. Judge Harper raised a hand. The bylaws don't override property law. County records show no recorded easement. You were trespassing. Patty's lawyer tried to interject. Your Honor, my client believed. Judge Harper cut him off. Belief is not permission. Sit down. Diane returned to our table, opened the briefcase, pulled out a folder, handed copies to the judge and the opposing counsel. This is a repair invoice for the original gate Miss Drummond destroyed. $340. This is the incident report filed with the county sheriff. This is a witness statement from Gregory Hale, resident of Pinewood Creek, who observed Miss Drummond trespassing on 4 separate occasions. This is a second statement from Linda Morris, a third from Thomas Brennan. All notarized, all consistent. I sat there watching the pages pass from hand to hand, each one a data point, a measurement, a proof. Nothing wobbled, nothing leaned. The structure held. I'd designed this case the way I'd designed the gate. Load-tested every claim. Verified every fact. Built redundancy into every argument. And now, under a pressure, it wasn't bending. It was doing exactly what I'd calculated it would do. Judge Harper read through the documents in silence. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The clock ticked. The air conditioner hummed. Finally, she looked up, removed her glasses, set them on the bench. I'm dismissing the plaintiff's claim in its entirety. Miss Drummond had no legal right to access the defendant's property. Mr. Webb posted adequate warnings. The drainage feature in question is a lawful land use modification. The defendant's counterclaim is sustained. Miss Drummond will pay Mr. Webb $18,000 in damages, court costs, and attorney fees. Additionally, the HOA is ordered to issue a formal public apology and cease all claims regarding this property. Miss Drummond is personally fined $500 under county ordinance for repeated trespassing. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down, one sharp crack, then silence. Patty didn't move, didn't look at me, just sat there staring at the table in front of her. Her lawyer closed his folder, packed his briefcase, left without another word. Diane turned to me, placed a hand on my shoulder. You built this right, Marcus. I nodded, didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just stood, picked up my briefcase, and walked toward the exit. Outside, the air was cooler, overcast, smelled like rain coming. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing slowly, feeling the workload of the past 2 months lift just slightly. Not gone, just distributed, spread across the foundation I'd built. Patty walked past me on her way to the parking lot. She glanced at me once. No words, no apology, just a brief look that said she finally understood. The line she'd tried to erase was still there, and now it was reinforced with 18,000 reasons not to cross it again. I got in my truck, drove home. The gate was still standing when I pulled into the driveway. Steel, unmoving, exactly where I'd left it, and so was everything it meant. December, Saturday morning, I stand at the gate with my hands in my jacket pockets, watching the sun rise over the eastern tree line. No coffee this time, just the cold air and the stillness that comes when something long and difficult finally settles into place. The steel feels different under my fingertips now. Not colder, not warmer, just known. Like a measurement I've taken enough times that I don't need the tape anymore. I know what it holds. I know what it means. The check from the HOA arrived 3 days after the hearing. $18,000. Certified mail. No note. No apology beyond what the court ordered. I deposited it the same afternoon. Used $6,500 to pay Diane. $3,200 for a new irrigation system I'd been putting off, $1,800 to rebuild the chicken coop roof that had been sagging since I moved in. The rest sits in savings, not because I need it, but because it's evidence that some things can be measured, accounted for, and resolved, even when they start as something you can't see, like respect or boundaries. The HOA sent the required public apology by email. 2 paragraphs. Formal, bloodless. We regret the misunderstanding regarding property access. Mr. Webb's land is private and not subject to easement. We apologize for any inconvenience.